In this lesson, we will add a text layer to our composition. Okay, so far everything I've been showing you as far as new layers that we're adding from After Effects have been through the layer menu here at the top by going to Layer New. But now I want to show you how to do this with the context menu. So I can just drag this up here so we have a little bit more of an empty area on the timeline itself. And if I right click, we see that we get that same new option and then all of those same layer types that we had by going through that top menu. So I want to choose layer new text. So go ahead and click that. And that's just going to put an empty text layer there at the top of the stacking order in my timeline. And we see now we also have this little red line right there in the middle of the composition. So I want to go ahead and type a word in, and I'm going to type in some curly brackets at the beginning and end of that. So I'm just going to hold down Shift to type one of those, and then I'm going to go ahead and type in the word millions. And then I'm going to put another curly bracket at the end. And now I want to show you how to kind of change this text a little bit, because right now it's defaulting to white and I can't really see it on my light colored background. So I'm going to go ahead and just deselect for a moment here so that I'm no longer in the type edit mode. So you see that that took away that little line. And now if I select the layer, it really just looks like any other layer that I might have had selected. So let's also go ahead and bring back up our swatches. So I'm going to turn that eyeball on there. And I can move this around anywhere I want to. Now, remember earlier I told you that the keyboard shortcut for the selection tool was the V key. So right now you're seeing that I'm defaulting to the type tool, which is this right here. So if you've used any other kind of Adobe program, the type tool probably looks very similar to this, that capital T. So let's go ahead and hit the V. And we see that now we have that selection tool. So now I can grab my swatches and move them up out of the way. Okay, so now let's select our millions layer, and I can do that either here in the viewer or on my timeline, either way. And I want to change the color. Now, I could always go in here and click this text color and start moving this around. And that's going to give me lots of different options. I can move this here on the side to give me different options as well, but I want to actually use the color from my swatches. So I'm going to come over here and grab that eyedropper and hover it over this blue color for my swatches, and then we'll say okay, and that's going to give me that blue color, that teal color, exactly the same. Another way for me to add type to my composition is simply by skipping right ahead and going to the type tool itself. So instead of going layer, new type, I will come up here and grab that horizontal type tool, and I can click anywhere and start creating new type. Now, the thing you want to be careful about whenever you're using the type tool instead of creating a new type layer is that if I accidentally click here over this millions word, it's going to put me into editing mode of the millions word itself. And I don't want to change this word yet. I just want to create a new word. So I'll have to deselect that and then click somewhere else where I don't have a text layer. And I'm going to type in the words of videos viewed. And then so that I'm no longer typing, I'm just going to deselect out of that by clicking in this area here, and notice now I'm no longer editing that bit of type. And I can come up there and grab my selection tool and then move either of these words around as I please. Now there's some other properties for my text that I can change as well besides just that color. And we see that these here, the character and paragraph panels, are very similar to the character and paragraph panels that you would find in any other Adobe program. So if you're familiar with those, this shouldn't be too hard for you to catch on to. So let's say I want to make this little bit of millions text a little bit bigger. I can just come over here to the pixel. And one of the things you're going to definitely start to notice over time is anything you see in After Effects that is a value that's this orange yellow color is draggable and editable. So I can drag this to make it bigger or smaller, or I can also click and type in any value I want. So let's say I want this to be 200 pixels that's going to just automatically change that for me. So very easy to change and update that as you want to work. Now, I don't really want to use Times New Roman. I want to use a sans serif condensed font. So what I'm going to be using is PFDen. So I'm just going to type in that, and that's going to bring that up for me and automatically change that look. So we'll go ahead and click off of that. Now, you don't have to use this font, but this is what I'm going to be using for this project. But if you want to have similar results and you don't have access to PFDen, any kind of sans serif condensed font is going to give you a similar result. So I'm going to go ahead and click that millions again. And one of the things that I want is for it to be in all caps. Now, instead of me having to go back in and retype it with caps lock on, I can simply come over here to the edge of that character panel and drop this down, and this is falling off my recording area, but you can still see just a little bit that about halfway down here, if you're following along, you can see that we have all caps as an option. So if I click that, it's automatically going to change those to capitals, and if I change my mind, I can go back in, uncheck that, and I just have the ability to switch back and forth between those different styles without having to retype anything. So that becomes really handy. Now, also, I can get to that if I just drag this down a little bit here by selecting this button. So that's going to give me the same result than going through that panel there. So good to keep in mind. Now, I also want to change the font of the videos viewed piece of text. So I'm also going to do PFDen for that one. And I am going to leave this one lowercase, but I want to change its color to this more red color up here. So we'll come over there, and since we still have that piece of text selected, I can just grab that eyedropper tool, hover it over the red, click, and that's going to give me that red text. Now, that time you notice that I use the eyedropper tool right here in the character panel instead of going into the fill color and using the eyedropper there. Same result, you just don't get that automatic preview like you did when you're inside of the color picker itself. Now some of the things that I want to start editing and working on for this text are things like the tracking and kerning. So I'm going to come up here and turn off swatches for a moment. So go ahead and select that, turn off that eyeball there. Then I'm going to grab this millions bit of text and just kind of bring this up a little bit more towards the top. And I want this to be tracked out a little bit. So the tracking is going to be this option right here. So if I drag this up, it's going to put more space in between those letters, and vice versa, they'll get closer together as I come in there and change that. Now, the kerning itself is only going to be changed if I am actually using the type tool. So let's say that maybe I want there to be a little bit less space in between these two individual letters here. So I'm going to come up here, grab my type tool, and hover in here, just click there, and that is going to open up this option for me, which is going to be the kerning. So kerning is in between individual letters, and tracking is going to be over all the letters as a whole. So then I can start to drag this in and out to change that space individually. Now, another thing I can do instead of using this is a keyboard shortcut, which I really like using, and that's just going to be, I can click in between any other letters just as I normally would, and then I hold the Alt key and the arrow key if I'm going to use the left arrow or the right arrow depending on which way I want it to go. So here I'm using the left arrow while holding Alt, and now I'm using the right arrow, and you can see that that is changing the kerning right there between that S and the curly bracket. So that is helpful if you don't want to come in here and try to find which little value you're trying to edit. That's just a little bit quicker way of doing it. And one other thing that we have to worry about here is the paragraph panel. And most of the time I'm not setting a large amount of text in After Effects simply because it's not the greatest medium to have lots of text on screen for people to read, just depending on what kind of project you're making. But I do use it a lot for the different alignments of my text. So if I want my text to have its alignment on the left. Right now that's what it's defaulting to. You can come in there and change those. And you see that as I'm clicking those different alignments, the text itself is moving, and that's just because of this anchor point. That we'll get into a little more later what that anchor point is and does, but basically the anchor point's position is what is really changing that alignment for the paragraph settings. So really quickly, I want to come up here, grab that of videos view bit of text. Let's make that a little bit bigger and just kind of get it to sort of be just right underneath that millions piece of text. And I really want all of this to be right in the middle of my composition. So I'm going to bring up that title action safe again, and we can select both of these layers at the same time to move together by doing the same thing that we did earlier when we wanted to import multiple layers. I'm simply going to select this layer, hold shift, and then select that other layer right underneath it. So the of videos viewed and millions are selected together now, and I can click and drag them at the same time. So I'm just going to drag these down and just kind of optically center it right there in the middle, at least from the up to down. And then here on the sides, I'm just barely letting that overlap with these lines. And if I really want to get fine-tuned with it, instead of dragging it with my mouse, since I have them selected, I can use those arrow keys, and that will just kind of nudge that type one way or the other by simply using the arrow keys and not trying to do it with my mouse.